let's try another one. So now we have this equation. I just reordered it to put my x squared first. This is also in standard form, which means it's going to be easiest to find my x-intercepts and y-intercepts with standard form. Y-intercept is quick and easy. Those x's become 0. So my y-intercept is just 6. 0, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Right at 6. Now, for my x-intercepts, I need to set this whole thing equal to 0, and I need to factor. Now, in the last video we talked about there's a fast, easy way to factor it, and then one that's harder. This has a number in front of the x squared. It has something in front of the x squared, which means this is the longer way of factoring. But we still want to try factoring first before we rely on the quadratic formula. So I'm still going to try to factor this, and this is a good review of the other method of factoring. So for the other method of factoring, you're going to do the first number times the last number. That gives you a negative 6. And now you want to multiply to this and add to that. So multiply to negative 6, add to negative 1. That sounds like negative 3 and 2. That multiplies to negative 6 and adds to negative 1. So what I'm going to do next is exchange this negative x for a negative 3x and a positive 2x. So same numbers I came up with here, but I'm using them there. And notice nothing changed. Negative 3x plus 2x is still negative x. It's the same thing. I'm just exchanging it for those two numbers. And then I still have my plus 6 equals 0. So now you look at your first two and think, what do those two things have in common? They have a negative x in common, so I take it out and I'm left with an x plus 3. And I look at those two and see what they have in common. Well, they have a positive 2 in common. Take that out and I'm left with an x plus 3. And now I'm going to look at these two and see what those two things have in common. Well, this one and this one both have an x plus 3. So I'm going to take that out. So if I take an x plus 3 out of this one, I'm left with a negative x. And if I take an x plus 3 out of that one, I'm left with a positive 2. And now you're factored. So that one was a little longer than the last other method, but that's how I always do it if you have anything in front of your x squared. So now that it's factored, I can set them both equal to 0 and solve for my x-intercepts. So it looks like we have an x-intercept at negative 3 and positive 2. Negative 3 and positive 2. Over here at negative 3 and positive 2. Okay, I have my x-intercepts and my y-intercept done. That means I have exhausted my standard form. So next thing I need to do is complete the square to get my vertex form. Now, something about completing the square to get your vertex form. First off, you really aren't allowed to have anything in front of the x squared when you complete the square. So, to fix that, I'm going to start by taking that sign, that number, out of everything. So I take this, a negative out of that one, and I'm left with that. Take a negative out of that one, I'm left with that. And take a negative out of that one, left with that. So now you'll notice I don't have anything in front of my x squared. Now I can complete the square. So I'm going to want that. That's my vertex form. Remember the first step, we always take our middle number, divide it by 2. So that's going to be a 1/2. Then I take this, and I'm going to FOIL it out. I would distribute your parentheses first, and then distribute your negative back in. So this is x squared plus 1/2 x plus 1/2 x is a positive x. 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. So we got that. Now I can distribute my negative in to get negative x squared minus x minus 1/4. And you'll notice real quick, the first two things match our first two original things. That means we're on the right track. So I have this negative 1/4, but I want it to be a positive 6. So we think, what do I have to do here to get my negative 1/4 to be a 6? Well, I would need to add 6 1/4, or 6.25. Negative 1/4 plus 6.25, that gives me my positive 6. So that 6.25 is the one that goes outside on my vertex form. So you have now completed the square. Here is your vertex form. Kind of ugly looking, not the prettiest vertex form. I mean, fractions, right? But it's still a vertex form. So now we can still come in here and say that my vertex is going to be the opposite sign of that one. So negative 1/2, comma, that one. So I graph that. My vertex is negative 1/2, comma, 6.25. And my axis of symmetry is the x value on my vertex. So it's down negative 0.5. And now I have enough to draw my parabola. Now, that's our second example. Are you ready to kind of hate me? Because there's actually a shortcut here. We actually didn't need to do any of this fraction stuff. We did not even need to complete the square at all. We didn't have to deal with any of these fractions. So right now you probably hate me a little bit. But here's why. If I look here, notice my axis of symmetry is always going to be exactly halfway between my x-intercepts. So if you know what your x-intercepts are, all you need to do is find halfway, and that's your axis of symmetry. And notice it works on our last example too. My x-intercepts are here at 1 and 3. Halfway between that is 2. Your axis of symmetry will always be halfway between those two x-intercepts. So if I can find my axis of symmetry by just going halfway, then that means you also know the x value of your vertex because they're always the same. So then the last thing you really need is to find the y value of the vertex. Well, if I know what the x value is, to find the y value, you can just plug the x value into the equation. If you plug negative 1/2 in here for x and simplify, you're going to get 6.25. Same with the last one. If I knew my axis of symmetry was halfway, so I know my x point, if you plug 2 into this equation, you're going to get negative 1. So we actually didn't need to complete the square at all. You just do your x-intercepts, find halfway, and then plug that halfway point into the equation to get the y value of your vertex. So yeah, you might hate me a little bit, sorry. But the reason I didn't teach you the shortcut first is because the shortcut doesn't always work. The shortcut only works if you have x-intercepts. But we talked about there is a possibility you don't have any x-intercepts. And if you don't have x-intercepts, you can't find the axis of symmetry halfway between. So that is why I showed you the long way. So that if you find out you don't have any x-intercepts, you can still complete the square and find your vertex and axis of symmetry. And in fact, that's what's going to happen in our next example. So in the next video, we'll come down and do one more example in this where we don't have any x-intercepts.